If you've ever felt like you were tensing up or you've struggled to chain techniques together during your rolls, don't worry, you're not alone. I had this exact same problem as well. And honestly, a lot of jiu-jitsu hobbyists or enthusiasts also have this problem as they're coming up throughout their jiu-jitsu career. So in this video, I want to share with you guys what we can do to chain our techniques together better and how this actually comes off of being able to relax and be a lot more calm in the chaos of rolling and training. If you are new here, thank you for checking out the channel. Make sure you give this video a like and you guys hit that subscribe button, especially if you are a jiu-jitsu hobbyist or an enthusiast who values a lot of practical jiu-jitsu advice. This is probably a pretty good channel for you to be checking out. In case you don't know who I am, my name is Chasen Hill. I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt. I've been teaching and training now for over 15 years and struggling with this idea of being able to be relaxed and chain techniques together is a very common problem that students notice they have, but then they really struggle to make strides and improvements in these areas. For me personally, where I started to notice this being a really big problem, or I guess a time that I really started putting some effort and energy into improving, was probably around mid blue belt roughly. So I had been training for probably around 3.5, maybe almost close to 4 years. I would hear some general advice about, you should be smooth, you should be relaxed, the techniques shouldn't come hard, and you should be able to sense these things that are happening during live training and action. To tell you the truth, I honestly just thought it was me lacking knowledge when it came to chaining techniques together. Maybe I didn't know the next steps, or the next steps that I knew wasn't good enough to solving the problem. But it wasn't until I was actually talking with my coach that he actually gave me the advice of, well, in a weird way, you training techniques together comes from you actually being able to relax more. And I thought that was a very interesting point and a kind of counterintuitive point, because a lot of times when we're thinking about training or grappling and we're in a contact sport, we're thinking about implying our force or implying our will, and we have to have this sense of roughness and toughness to everything we do. He was saying that imagine if you were holding side control and I had a head and arm control, meaning that I had the underhook on one side and I had the crossface on the other side. So I'm really just squeezing and grinding somebody's face, and I've got a deep underhook on the other side. If you're so committed to the upper body squeeze and you're using your arms for all of the strength, well, when they start to properly execute the escape, you have to counter that escape. And if you're so committed to the squeeze, you're going to be behind of how they actually counter. You're going to react late. You getting rid of their framing arm or you getting rid of their cross face on your neck is going to be slightly behind because you're too committed to the position that you're in. There's this idea of actually being fluid and being relaxed will help you chain next techniques together. And he even gave the example too of being able to submit somebody off of a counter. I think that's a really high level of jiu-jitsu, in my personal opinion, is where people are going to give you problems and they're going to counter your moves, but you making them pay for the counter is where I think the elite jiu-jitsu people come in. What I mean by that is if someone actually has to fight really hard to get on their side from side control or fight really hard to get the underhook because you're making their life so much more difficult, it's going to increase your percentage chances of the submission from that exchange or that scramble, or it's going to increase your percentage of you countering their escape potential or in you being able to recover. A big part of that comes from being relaxed and not being over tense. So it was the same kind of advice that he gave to me when it either came to the submission aspect or countering their escape and being able to regain my position. When you're able to relax and not be as tense, it allows you to use other parts of your body and other sensors that we have. I can feel when they start to underhook. I can feel through my hip where their knee is starting to come in, and that's going to help me chain those next connections together. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. What have you done to improve chaining your techniques together? What have you done to start to become more relaxed and not be as tense as you've been training jiu-jitsu? What can we do to actually improve our ability to chain techniques together and become more relaxed? Just being able to relax is the first big step. When you can relax, it allows you to do what we call predict or sense when you maybe need to chain another technique together. Chaining has two parts to it. We can chain in the sense of offensive, where we are the one passing the guard and immediately mounting and immediately forcing the back take, which is kind of how we do in drilling more or less. And it happens with lighter resistance. Eventually, you're going to train against people who are good enough where as soon as you guard pass, if you don't maintain that position long enough, then you're not going to be able to mount and they're going to escape. If you guard pass right away and then you immediately mount, well, if their escapes are any good, that shouldn't really happen. They should be able to put up a solid defense. One of the best ways to actually relax and improve your technical prowess is to slow the hell down. And that goes a long way. The game that I like to play is called the 5-second game whenever I coach this to students, or if I see a student who commonly has this as a problem. The 5-second game is essentially a task that you can do while training and rolling that ultimately helps you slow down, which then ultimately will help you relax and chain techniques together. Essentially, the rules are very simple. If you are going to be in a position, whether it's a offensive position or a defensive position, you have to wait a minimum of 5 seconds before you advance. If I was to guard pass, well, I have to guard pass and then I have to hold the side mount position for a minimum of 5 seconds before I can mount. Your job during that is to be as relaxed as possible and to be honest with yourself. Now, there's going to be times that you're going to not be successful. You're going to be there for 5 seconds and they're going to get out. And that's kind of the point. That probably highlights your poor ability to control the side mount. You're using energy and you're using your string to save your poor technique per se. It's not going to be good for your overall technical development or becoming more smooth or being able to chain techniques together. Then after you held them for 5 seconds, then you could hold the mount position. You hold that for 5 seconds at minimum. If you take the back, you hold the back for 5 seconds, and then maybe you work an attack. A lot of times students think that they're in a position for a lot longer than they are, but they're really not. I call it popcorning, where they're kind of like popping from one position to the next position to the next position. I understand that there is value there when you're talking about competition and racking up points and playing that strategy. We're just trying to improve our ability to chain techniques together to not be as tense when rolling. And so we don't want to do that when that's the goal or the focus that we're trying to improve. The next big thing is think about breathing. And I know this is a very common thing that is said throughout jiu-jitsu, but being able to breathe is very, very important. It not only is a physiological benefit that will make you last longer because you're taking in more oxygen and then we're expelling CO2, breathe. And you're taking in big breaths and then breathing out. Then you're taking in big breaths and then breathing out, which makes everything else relax. Of course, when your heart rate is up, that is much harder to do. You cannot do that as much. You're doing everything you can to get every ounce of oxygen that you can back into your system and breathe out CO2. What can we do to piggyback off the 5-second game that we talked about earlier with breathing? After you do the 5-second game and you get there and I knee cut and I'm in side control, I take a giant breath whenever I'm able to control them. I knee cut, they're framing across my face. I've killed their frame. I've achieved my side control. They've tried to escape. They've tried to underhook. I've killed all of that. I've done it. Once I'm there, I go, and I take one big breath and then I go about what I need to do. If you make that a habit, it really helps in the long game. Same thing, even if you're more of a defensive guy. Let's say I was in the bottom of the mount and I worked really, really hard to get to even just one leg of the half guard position. I get to that half guard position. Now I have to wait for 5 seconds. And once I get it and I feel confident, I take a big breath. I know there's a lot of strategies out there about hiding your breath and not letting somebody sense your breath. Okay, Mr. Miyagi, I understand that. And there are those tactical abilities out there, but 99% of people don't need that and can't do that right now. They need to focus on one thing at a time. Focus on the 5-second game. And then every time you get to the next position, take a big breath and slow down. And all of those things will help you not be as tense, and they will help you be able to predict and read what's going to happen next. And then the third and final thing that you can start to do is put a little bit of pre-study into your goals or what you're going to do before you show up. Basically showing up to the gym with an idea or a focus of what we want to accomplish. Now, this takes a little bit more time to be able to do. I would say if you can't even master the 5-second game and you can't even master the breathing, then don't focus on this part, but eventually you will. So now you could add this in. If I know that I'm showing up to the gym and I'm focusing on knee cut passes, well, there's a good chance that whenever I knee cut pass, I'm trying to pass to a specific type of control after. I'm trying to pass to a leg drag, or I'm trying to pass to side mount, or I'm trying to pass to the mount or quarter guard, or all of these other positions. When you have a plan, that's going to help the chain of techniques happen next. For a lot of us that are hobbyist or enthusiast students who don't have the luxury of training 6 or 7 days a week, the more planning and the more prepping you have, it's going to make those connections sooner. You're just making those connections while off the mat versus making them on the mat. Are they more meaningful when you're on the mat and you're doing it against resistance? Absolutely. But is there any harm making a connection off the mat, then going back to the mat and trying to make it there? So what do I mean by making this connection? I can go from side mount and I can take their back. How does that actually happen? Or I can go to side mount and I can mount from there, or I can go to side mount and I know 9 different escapes that they can do, and I have counters for all 9 escapes. You make that connection of like, man, I never realized how annoying it is if they get an underhook, or man, I never realized how annoying it is when they turn on their side. And already having solutions to those problems, that's the connection that I'm talking about. And so you can definitely wait to find that connection on your own and in class by just showing up and just training. But if you want to make it faster, do it in pre-study, do it research, think ahead, actually plan out what you're going to do whenever you show up. That's not that hard to do. I'm not asking you to show up with like a playbook of all of your techniques written out and you're down to execute to the nth degree and you know every step. No, I'm asking you to show up with an action and an idea that you're wanting to accomplish or an area you're wanting to focus on. I do think if you are an upper belt, especially like a purple belt or a brown belt, I think the more detailed your plan, the better it is. I think lower belts should go in with an idea. The idea of escaping mount, the idea of escaping side mount, the idea of maintaining close guard, because you realistically don't know what you don't know yet. Kind of fine-tuning a specific technique that early in your career, I think kind of slows you down. If I'm just being perfectly honest, there's probably people out there that disagree with me, which is totally fine. I think being able to focus on an area and capture as much data as possible is the biggest benefit for a lower belt specifically. The 3-step process to actually improving your relaxedness and chaining your techniques together is number 1, the 3-second game, basically slow you down. Number 2 is taking a big breath after you count to 5, or you've done that control of the 5-second game. And then number 3 is actually showing up to the gym with a plan, actually being able to pre-study. And these are all things that I had to do, that I had to learn. These are things that I actually help my students do all the time. So I've seen the benefits to them. Are they the only ways to accomplish these things? Absolutely not, but they're the things that have worked for me and for my students. If you're looking for someone to help you in a more strategic way with that planning and that preparation, or you're wanting to get more focus and direction and you're wanting to figure out really what your jiu-jitsu needs, then you'd probably be a pretty good candidate for my coaching program that I call the acceleration system. Essentially, we take your jiu-jitsu, we put it under a magnifying glass. I have you do some audits. We figure out where your gaps, where your weaknesses are, what are your strengths, and then we build a plan around you. And this makes it a very unique transformation. My goal is to take you within 12 months and turn your jiu-jitsu into a whole next level. Go ahead and click the link down below. That way you can schedule your time and we can get you going. That is going to wrap up the end of this video. Thank you guys for sticking around and checking it out. Make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to the channel, especially if you value this type of jiu-jitsu advice and you're a hobbyist and an enthusiast. With that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one.